All right, welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Cosby from the University of Alabama, Huntsville PD. He served in the U.S. Army. He has over 20 years experience in university law enforcement. He has been the chief of police since 2021. He has a bachelor's in criminal justice and a master's in criminal law and society. And in speaking with him offline, I know that wellness is something that is really important to him. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation today. Welcome to the show, Chief Cosby. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Paige. I appreciate it.
Of course, when I read these bios, I feel like an underachiever. I'm like,
Oh,
that is really impressive. And the one thing that kind of stuck out to me, obviously I know that you've focused on your personal development, your professional development, but entering into this role as chief of police in 2021, I see this number, and we all kind of know what happened in 2020, 2021, and what a challenging time that was. What was that like, stepping into this new position as chief of police in such a challenging time in our recent history?
it was difficult. Coming from my previous position, we were in it deep, and I came from Northern Virginia, and I would go to work once a week. I'd go 1 week out of the month, and our command staff would rotate. Obviously, our officers were there 24/7. So I was spending a lot of time at home. I was spending a lot of time on the couch. We were trying to be healthy as a family. And then I move and I come down to University of Alabama, Huntsville, and again, they are just coming out of it.
Mm,
So they're a little further ahead, maybe, but it was very odd, and I needed to try to kickstart the department, right? We're a small department. Universities, so the students hadn't been around a lot. So there was a lot of things that we could do to kind of get them moving in the right direction and kind of get back into the full-fledged policing. And one of those things was just the mental side of it, right? Again, trying to make sure that everybody was back on track and they were back 100% thinking that they were, going to work every day, and that our students were starting to come back, our faculty and staff were back, the university was starting to really start opening back up. And so, making sure that they're still squared away on officer safety skills and things like that.
mhm.
But at the same time, mental health. I will probably mention mental health a lot during this interview, just because at the university in environment, we deal with that a lot. So mental health of making sure that they're good on their end, right? At home, making sure they didn't have any major loss or whatever it may be as a result of COVID, and make sure that they're in the right headspace as well when they come back. So I would say I just, especially being a new chief at a new department, I kind of took stock of everything, right? And I kind of looked at everything. What did our training look like? Make sure that they're getting the proper training, physical, mental, and then on the job type training as well. So I would say that that's kind of what I looked at when I first got here.
Thank you. Did you feel like there was kind of a shift in public perception or support, and that you had to like make more of that effort to kind of win back the trust of the community? Or how was that for you guys specifically? Because I know every agency is different, every community was different. Some really struggled, some felt like they had the support of their community. What was that like, kind of coming back and navigating the public perception or attitude?
Yeah, again, it was, geographically. So coming
Mm,
from Virginia, it was a little different.
sure.
When I got down here, it seemed like for the most part, the population was still very welcoming of law enforcement, whether it be university law enforcement or it be municipality. And again, that just has to do with the demographics and the geography of parts of the United States. We see that today, right? So I was very fortunate to be able to come into one as a new chief, and then two into a community that was coming out of a couple different type of concerns, right? And so again, the university welcomed me. They never lost trust or belief in the police department, and that goes for most of not only university but for most of the municipalities in the area as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. You mentioned mental health, so I definitely want to dive into this a little bit. And I think that there's different ways that we can kind of address this, and I think we can do it all in this conversation. But
Okay.
one of the things that you said is, in the population that you serve, you're seeing a lot of mental health. What are some of the things maybe that you're seeing, and what are some of the unique skills that university police officers are equipped with to be able to address mental health concerns and calls?
So I don't have exact numbers because the university
Sure.
can't exactly ask, but it is very obvious that the student population here at UAH has a high percentage that are on the spectrum.
Mm,
So that may be ADHD, that may be autism, that may be, a number of other things, as well as mental health concerns, right? And I think I've been doing this for 20 years, and the one thing that has not changed in 20 years is that parents tend to say, okay, my child's starting a new part in their life and it's going to be exciting and it's going to be fun. And so they kind of send them off to college and be like, their mental health is probably going to be okay.
yeah.
And so sometimes that goes unnoticed. Sometimes the student might get off their medication, and before they know it, they're so far gone that they're struggling in the classroom, they're struggling mentally, and with their roommates or whatever the case may be, and it may take a while to get it back on track. So that's one thing that I've noticed, and then second of all, um, notice that just the coping. I don't think for whatever reason. I don't think the students maybe understand how to deal with it, whether that's talking with a counselor, talking with a friend, accepting help, and then just try instead of just trying to bury it and deal with it. I know that's kind of maybe the mentality that was back in the day, and I think we're starting to get out of that. I think the college students now today, say in the last 5 years or so, probably do understand a little bit more about reaching out and asking for help. But before it was looked down upon maybe,
Mm,
and so. Whether they have mental health issues or whether they're on the spectrum of some sort or ADHD or whatever the case may be, it is a little different here. I love walking through campus. I love walking across campus at least once a week, and I try to say hi to everybody I pass by. And I would say 75% of the people I pass by, they're looking down at the ground, right? They have their AirPods in and they're in their zone.
mm,
And so it's harder to speak to the students because again, they are very nervous or very focused on their studies. It's just a little different population that I have not dealt with at Vanderbilt University or at George Mason University in my tenures. So we do focus a little bit more on mental health or strategies to help them out here at UAH. Now, one thing that a lot of municipalities and a lot of universities do is CIT training, crisis intervention training. And so that's a week-long training that allows the officers to kind of understand more of what a student or what an individual is dealing with, whether, they're not listening to the officer's instructions or whether they're self-harming or whatever the case may be. We may be able to talk to them a little bit more, recognize it a little bit quicker, and then try to get them that help. On top of that, you mentioned we have canines. So we're very fortunate here that we don't need drug dogs here at the campus. We don't have enough activities. We don't have a football team. We're not Division I, so we don't have explosive dogs. If we have a special event and we need something like that, we'll ask another agency to come in and help us with that. But we do have two canine therapy dogs. These canine therapy dogs, their partner is a regular police officer that's on patrol every day. And they split up, one in the first half of the week, one in the second half of the week, and they go on patrol. They go on calls, but they're there in case we get a mental health call, or they also go to the office of IT. They go to the HR office. They go to different colleges. They spend time in the student union, and they'll just go around on their regular patrols and say, "Hey, you want to pet my dog?" And
mm,
it's amazing. I literally have seen it with my own eyes at different events, and the student or even the faculty or staff member just sits down on the ground and these dogs will climb all over them. And for students that had a dog at home and now they're here and they're missing, a little homesick, or they're struggling with some mental health issue, or they just want to pet a dog and just take a little stress off them. It's crazy. You can literally see the stress leave their body.
yeah.
And it's just amazing and how that works. And I never even thought about this program until Vanderbilt University, I heard that they were doing it. And then a municipality in Northern Virginia started doing it. So when I got here, that was one of the first things that I looked into. And I had a couple officers that really liked the idea and really wanted to move forward with it.
I love that. And I agree. We see it even, at conferences. You see like the toughest dude that has like a straight face, and then you get a dog in there and they're on the ground in a puddle, and I
Yeah,
think there's no
absolutely.
denying that dogs are effective.
Yeah.
And some of the things I wanted to kind of circle back to that you said is one, this idea of like, how do we create more connection?
Mhm.
And I think that through the canines, it sounds like that's creating more of that presence and that connection, right? It's like getting someone out
Absolutely.
of their head, like out of like looking at the ground and interacting with something in a positive way that's happening right then and there. Um, and then you said, being able to communicate with people and trying to give the resources for healthy coping mechanisms and trying to create more of that connection. I think that everyone saw this coming out of COVID, right? Where like there was maybe that disconnect that was there before. But then I also think that with technology, it's harder to, we have a lot of
Yep. Yep.
kids who grew up with texting and, all of the technology and the video games. And so maybe that connectivity wasn't something that they experienced like we did, like I got my first cell phone in high school and it was like analog, we didn't have, like, we weren't on it and it was dead half the time, and so
Yep.
we grew up in, I think, a different time. And so I love this idea of how do we connect more with them? How do we make sure that we're putting forth resources and having conversations that are helping them to, have these positive interactions with people, but then also building that trust, knowing that if they are struggling with something, they know where to go. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me, and I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on this because um, I think I didn't consider this before that there's still maybe a stigma in the student population of having challenges or, needing mental health resources. And it makes total sense when you say it. I'm like, duh, of course, that makes sense. Um, we also know that there's a stigma in law enforcement for needing mental health resources. And when you have officers who are there to be the helpers, how do you also make it known with your team that the helpers can also need help? Like, how do we break the stigma within law enforcement too? Because I would imagine that's a difficult thing of like, hey, I'm the person who's supposed to have everything together. I'm the person who's showing up and helping everybody else. But then when I need things, how are you conveying that message that it's also okay for the helper to get help?
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned, the big tough guy at the conference, and all of a sudden he breaks
Yeah.
down when he sees the dog, right? And so, yeah, it is a perception that, police officers, when they're on scene, they don't show any emotion, or, and then when they go home, they're not supposed to show emotion, but they do, right? We're humans, There's a lot of veterans that are in law enforcement. I mean, I'm one of them. I have several others in my department, and at times we may struggle with something that we dealt with when we were in the service, right? Or something we saw on a call. So it is very important to let your officers know that it's okay. And one thing is the canines, right? They're just as useful for the student body as they are for our officers. Our officers love it. I leave my door open 90% of the time, and one of the dogs will come running in, and I have a little jar with dog treats in it, right? So I mean, I
Yeah.
love seeing the dog too. I got two dogs at home, so
Yeah.
that's great. Um, Another one is, I create an environment where you can be a little vulnerable. Like I let people know that, I'm a veteran and I have struggled with PTSD in the past before, and it's okay, right? If you wake up one morning and you're having a rough day, call us, let us know, let's see what we can do. And also, I think leadership. Again, we're a 16, 17 person department, right? And so I think it's important to make sure that your first line, front line leadership understands my leadership style, and that they have a good enough relationship with their officers that those officers can call them and say, listen, Sarge, Lieutenant, I'm having a rough day. Give me a couple hours. I'm going to come in, but I just need a couple hours. Or, hey, I got a doctor's appointment or I have a mental health appointment this afternoon. I need to leave a couple hours early. Understanding that those things happen. We also always have a debrief when we have a major event. Luckily, that doesn't happen very often, but we do have suicide on campus from time to time and things like that. And that's tough for anyone, especially if you've never been exposed to it before. So we do have a debriefing, and we have an opportunity they can go through an EAP program, and they know that. We recommend that. But we also have a program set up with Huntsville Police Department where they can reach out to their chaplain, and they can talk to them. Or we do have a couple peer. We don't use them very often. We do have a couple peer officers that have been trained in peer group, but sometimes it's tough to really talk to somebody that you work directly with. Sometimes it's easier to talk with somebody that's removed from your own department. So, but we do have those options. But I think it's an environment. It's an environment understanding that, hey, we all have bad days for whatever reason. And it's not this job, missing a couple hours for an appointment or having to call out for a day because you're not feeling well for whatever reason. It's not the end of the world. The department will go on. This university will go on just fine. And I think having that creating that environment is very important for the officers.
Yeah. So I want to kind of recap it and then I want to dive into a couple of these. But from my understanding, it starts with you as a leader saying, hey, I've had my own experiences with these things. I've also used resources to help me with these things. It's okay to need these things and creating that environment of care and having a little bit of vulnerability and communication surrounding wellness. And then creating opportunities for training and resources that are going to help. And then leveraging local partnerships to be able to then expand, your offerings and your reach. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. The last part there, it'd be silly not to use other resources that we have in the area, whether it be for somebody that went through a bad day or had a bad call and needed to talk to somebody, or whether it be training opportunities for active shooter or DUI. Huntsville works very closely with the FBI. They have a facility right here on the Arsenal, just a few miles away. So we work closely with them and we try to get on their training calendar. And that's another thing with mental health, right? These officers might, we're in a university, it's kind of a smaller university. Maybe they get a little bored from time to time. So that's why I try to give my officers an opportunity to do almost any type of training they want, as long as it has a connection to our mission, right? I'm not going to go have them go to some air defense, training or something just because. But if it's related to our mission, I want them to get the training they want because that makes things exciting, right? And it gives them opportunities later in their career to get promotion and things like that. So I think that's
Yeah.
important too.
Yeah. It's interesting because I should say I know. I've talked to a lot of chiefs across the country, and I've talked to a lot of departments who are really small. And it kind of goes back to what we said before, where like you say something and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, duh,
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people forget that there are other agencies and other resources that are willing to help, that you can
Very
band
much.
together and join forces. I think that sometimes agencies operate as kind of these siloed little islands, and if you're small and maybe someone who's listening, if you are a small organization, are there other agencies around you that have different resources or opportunities where you could partner up and leverage those resources? And I would I would find it very hard to believe if an agency reached out to someone else and said, "Hey, like we're smaller, we want to make sure that we have, everything to keep our team safe. Can we, participate in your chaplaincy if we need it, or can we send our guys to some of your training opportunities?" Like, I don't know if I have ever met a leader that would say no to that.
Yeah, no, and you shouldn't. And even as small as a department as we are, we've actually donated older armored vest. Like maybe they only have a year left on it, but there's a department nearby that they don't have any vest, right? They have a new employee and they count. So we get into at least we give them a year that they can wear that vest. We've purchased used vehicles from other departments because they rotate their vehicles out a little sooner than ours. So it brings down our mileage and we have a little newer vehicle, more reliable vehicle, and it saves us thousands, right? So you whether you're university police department or municipality, I would be I'd be hard pressed to find a chief that wouldn't want to share and help any way they can. Now, they may not always be able to do that, but willing to, yes,
Yeah.
it's very important.
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing I want to kind of circle back to is your own personal experience with wellness, and how you've been able to show your team that you are also human and to have kind of that vulnerability. Do you think that it's a leader's responsibility to talk about those things and to create that culture?
I think maybe it depends um, on the organization and what the, you know, I have not been in like a full-time, I've not been a member of a full-time SWAT team. Or when I was in the military, I wasn't a Delta Force officer or a Ranger officer, right? So maybe those higher level, high speed, low drag organizations, maybe they don't talk about that as much. But here at the university, it takes a unique officer to work at a university. A lot of municipalities will say that university policing is maybe not more dangerous, but harder than working as a police officer in a county or municipality because our mission is more service oriented, I believe,
Mm.
because we're not going from call to call to call, because our calls are not a domestic violence here and a man with a gun here, and it's they're more service oriented. So we are constantly dealing with the public. And our public gets used to our levels of service, and sometimes we can't provide that level of service. So it gets difficult. They expect a lot more from us. Um, I personally have one boss, a direct report, but really I have 2,000 bosses, right?
Mhm.
All the faculty, all the staff, all the administrative personnel, they all will email me or call me or stop by the station whenever they want to, which is fine. That's great. I take that heat, right? I'm in charge of the organization, but it's different than if I was a police officer, even if I was chief for Huntsville. The chief of Huntsville does not get phone calls and emails from the community on a regular basis, right? He has several different layers above that, and he goes to community meetings and things like that. But it's different, so it can be harder. Um, but it is important for this population at the university level to know that our mission is more of a service. So we go to a lot of different events. May not even have anything to do with us. We really may not get anything out of it, except the population, our community sees us there and support. We're supporting them, and hopefully they support us. I can't remember if I mentioned it, but you kind of make deposits into the bank, right?
Mhm.
Positive deposits, because there's going to be somewhere down the line where I make a bad choice or decision, or one of my officers makes a bad choice or decision, and I'm going to rely on all those deposits, all those good positive deposits, because we'll have to make a withdrawal every once in a while. And, I'll be able to go back and be like, you know what, John, I'm really sorry about that. We missed the mark on that. But,
Mhm.
you know, we've been trying our best and I feel like we've been doing better and we're going to improve. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, no problem. It's okay. I understand. People make mistakes, right? Instead of, never talking to anybody, never being seen out in the community. And then we mess up and everybody's like, that department's horrible, right? They never do anything for the community. So, um, it can be more difficult, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the service part of it. I enjoy walking around and getting to know people and going to meetings and events and things like that. And I think my officers do too. If they didn't, they would go somewhere else. I've had officers that have worked in municipalities. Most of them have all worked somewhere else, and then they came to the university level and they've stayed. Maybe they stayed because they wanted to get their education. We get a reduced level of education. Maybe they were a little bit older and they were tired of running and gunning, at the municipality or at the city level, and they just wanted to slow down a little bit. I've had people have come here for a second retirement. They come here and they start a second retirement because they've been at 18, 20 years in another police department. So whatever the case may be, people come here because they want to and they stay. And
Yeah.
so I think that's important.
I really like the deposits, those positive deposits over time, because knowing that nothing's perfect and there's
Right.
always going to be a moment where you need those deposits to pay out. Like,
Exactly.
um, I had another chief say this, and I think he was talking about it in a different kind of context, but it was similar in the sense of he was talking about the arcade games. You know, the arcade game where you're putting quarters in it and it like pushes them to the edge.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like one day you're gonna like you keep investing in it, right? And then one day it's gonna pay off, kind of
Yeah.
idea. Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna put this in there and then one day it's gonna pay off and it's gonna pay off big. And so it's this idea of like, and I think we can relate this obviously to the trust in the community and the efforts that you're putting in the community. I also think that we can relate this to the things that we do on a consistent basis to prioritize ourselves, whether that's our wellness or our safety, and being proactive. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, it's all proactive efforts. How can you do the
Absolutely.
things today that are going to help you tomorrow? And I think that that's a really hard thing for people to do. I think that human nature, we're all a little bit reactive versus proactive. And so I'm a big fan of this idea of how can we put in place resources today? Maybe someone doesn't need a canine today. Maybe they're not going through a mental health crisis right now, but later it's
Yep.
going to help them, or maybe, and we can say this in a really simple example, like maybe you don't have an injury today, but we can put in place things that are going to help you so that it doesn't happen later. And I think that that's the message. Like, how can we be more proactive in all of our efforts, whether that's professional, personal, mental, physical, emotional, so that all of the things that we do now help us and pay out later?
Absolutely. I think that's great. And that's why we do that K9. And that's why those dogs walk around with our patrol officers and they don't just sit in the car and wait for us to get a call. We want the community to see them. And like you said, maybe the student is feeling fine today, but a month down the road, they're like, wait a minute, I saw that K9. I saw my roommate talking about that K9 and they seek the K9 out on patrol or they call our department or they ask their department to bring the dog in for a visit. So I think it's exactly right. Just being prepared and it'll help somebody sometime.
Yeah. You also talked a lot about professional development, and how this helps with wellness. And I completely agree with you. And I actually have talked about this a few times. I think that we're really starting to figure out what are all the different facets of wellness. And I think previously we were really kind of limited. We were talking about, okay, there's, physical, mental, nutritional, financial, spiritual. But what are those other pillars that also contribute to wellness? And I do believe that professional development, advancing your education and your knowledge on things is a part of wellness. I think it makes you more confident. It has you striving towards future goals and improving yourself long term. I also think that helping other people, engagement and service, I think helps with wellness. And I don't know if you agree with that, but anytime I have a positive interaction with somebody, if I'm like in my grind, it's really hard for me to like see past the trees sometimes. You're in the trenches and you're like, man, like I can't. And then you have a conversation with someone and you connect with someone and you feel reinvigorated and re-inspired by these positive interactions or feeling like maybe you helped someone, because sometimes you go through, I don't know if you feel like this, but I feel like this. Sometimes I'll go through weeks and months where I'm like, are my efforts even helping? Like, am I even reaching people? Am I even like, are my efforts actually doing something? And then you have that reinforcement of someone saying thank you or having a conversation. And I think that that also helps with wellness. Do you agree that, kind of both of those are a piece of it, or what is your opinion?
No, I do. I think, let's go back first of all, and I'll try to remember the second point, but for the officer, I think you have to have a work-life balance, right? So we want our officers to enjoy coming to work.
Mm.
And if all they do is come to work all the time and do the very bare minimum of training that they have to do, but they don't get to do some stuff that they want to do, then eventually that's going to wear old, right? That's going to wear on
Yeah.
them, and they're going to start to regret to come into work, and they're going to try to find a new place. So I think. At the university level, because we work well, I've always been attached to a larger organization that allows some training opportunities, and because again, we're not going from call to call to call, we're able to get some training done from sometimes right on during shift, right? We have three officers. We take one offline and they do some training scenarios with some people and then come back online, right? And so it kind of breaks up the monotony of going, on patrol every day. So I think it's important to keep the officer happy. So,
Mm,
you know, put in some things that you want to do, and if it's something that you want to do and it relates to our mission, well, I'm going to try to get you there, right?
yeah,
And then that shows that I'm supporting the officer as well, that the leadership is supporting the officer. And again, that if that one day makes them or allows them to be able to apply to another police department and leave, you know what? Well, okay, that happens sometimes, right? But I need to make sure that I have a positive, happy, emotionally fit officer while they're working for me.
yeah.
Now, what was the second point? I'm sorry, I've lost the second.
Service, feeling like you're actually
Service.
helping
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So it seems so mundane, but, or not mundane, but so tiny. But, just when I'm walking across campus and I'll see a family that's visiting, a upcoming, new coming freshman, and I'll tell that they just don't know what to do, right? They're lost. And so I'll ask them if they need any help. And maybe it's a building they need to go to, or maybe they had a question or stuff like that. Or maybe when I do make a traffic, I don't make many traffic stops, but when I make a traffic stop and or I help somebody on the side of the road that's had a flat tire, it does. It feels good to be a service to the community, right? And at this level, a lot of times that doesn't happen. Sure, you get the occasional email that says, "Oh, thanks for your help, Chief Cosby," but it's different when you're out there helping people. When I was a younger officer, and yeah, I was out on the streets all the time helping people, whatever the case may be. And sometimes that would be, unfortunately, we'd have to arrest them, but we were helping them stay safe, right? We were getting them out of a situation that was there dangerous for them, and public intoxication or something like that. But yeah, it feels good to be of service to the community, to do the job that we were hired for. You don't just want to always sit around all day. And that's why I walk around, right? I get tired of sitting in front of the desk sometimes and just responding to emails and working on projects. I like to get out, walk around, see my community, say hi to them, and maybe, do some service while I'm out there. So, yeah, I think those two aspects are very important for health.
Well, and I think to your point of what you said, it's like if that's the goal, if the goal is to be the most effective version of yourself so that you can help people to the best of your ability, then it has to start with you.
Yeah,
And I think so often, and I'm really guilty of this too, like we put everyone else first and we're so focused on helping everybody else that you forget about yourself, and you kind of, I'm going to put this in quotes, but like kind of let yourself go. And there has to be kind of that accountability, that self motivation. I hate to say motivation because I think it's more of a consistency and a dedication to yourself that you have to create for yourself. But um, I think that we have to first identify how can we be good? And what are those things that we need to do on a consistent basis to get there so that we
right,
can be effective in our careers and, the mission in which you're trying to accomplish. And that's hard sometimes. I think it takes a constant level of reassessment, because we're always going to change throughout our lives and our careers. And, um, this is a very simple example, but I had to rearrange kind of what I was doing because I was not focusing on the things that I needed to do. And so I had to sit back and say, okay, what do I need to do when I first wake up? What is like my morning routine that's going
right,
to help to set me on the right path? And then what are those non-negotiables throughout the week that I have to do in order to prioritize myself so that I can show up for you guys, And so I recognize that one, like I want to develop my skills too. And I think that when you reach a certain level, you kind of stop learning. You kind of reach your capacity of knowledge of what you have, and then it kind of ends there. And so, how can, no matter where you are in your career, how can you still challenge yourself and continue to learn and grow? And so, this is so simple, but I was like, okay, every day I'm going to wake up, I'm going to grab my coffee. I know coffee's bad, horrible for sleep, whatever, but we all have our things. So I grab my coffee and I pick up the book that I'm reading, and I'm going to read one chapter every morning. And it's always something that's going to help me to develop myself. And then I'll get on with my day. But I used to wake up and look at my emails or think about like the stresses of work immediately. And it's like, how can we, like, I can't show up for you if that's the first thing. If I'm waking up stressed already and like dreading what's going on, like I can't do that. So I think it's little things. Like, how can we reassess, okay, these things have worked, these things haven't. How can we set ourselves up for success physically, mentally, emotionally, so that we can be the best?
No, that's very true, and that's it's funny you say you read your book. So I try to I have a devotional, a men's devotional that I read every morning. It's 5 minutes devotional, and then I have a book that I'm currently reading. I try to read, and I may not even get a chapter right. I may only get like a half a chapter,
Yeah.
but I the only thing email I check is I check the nightly report. Because I need to make sure what happened the night before, make sure I don't need to jump on anything. But I don't check any of my other emails. I don't scroll, but yeah, you're right. You got to try to set yourself, get yourself ready and right for the day. And I drink coffee too. Anytime I come across a police officer that doesn't drink coffee, there's something wrong with them. I don't know how they survive.
Someone told me the other day that coffee is for old people. And I
Oh,
was like, wow,
no.
okay. Like we've reached that point where like the young kids are all drinking energy drinks. And so they
You're
think
right.
that coffee is for like the old people. I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, I think, and I think, what we just said, like that does take extra time. It takes a little extra effort to say, okay, we're going to wake up maybe a little bit earlier. Like maybe I'm going to wake up 10, 15 minutes earlier so that I can get those pages in. And you're right,
Yeah,
maybe it's not a full chapter, maybe it's only a couple pages, it's 10 minutes, but it's something that we
yeah,
can build on. And for me, it's a non-negotiable. What are those times that you can carve out to focus on your physical fitness that are non-negotiables?
right.
Schedule them in realistic times to where you can do it. And you don't book yourself anything else around that, and I've had to learn that the hard way because I would always just fill them with meetings and I had to tell myself, no, like
Yeah,
I have to go work out, every day I have to tell myself what is good. I have to remind myself of what I'm grateful for. That I think there's little things that create big impact over time that we don't even realize that we can do easily.
yeah,
I think that sometimes we think it's all these big things, and those things matter. I know you have your master's degree, and that was, I'm sure, a huge feat and a lot of effort. And those things are worthwhile too. But how can we like start at ground zero? How can we say, okay, what are the like small actionable things that are super easy, super realistic to build the confidence to then be able to add some of those harder things that are going to take more effort?
yeah. And I mentioned this at the very beginning about just being mentally, I don't want to say mentally weak, but just not persevering through all the time, right? And I'm guilty of that sometimes in my life, even though I feel like my generation and my wife's generation is a little more pushy and don't give up. I think sometimes people just forget about that. Like, we have a 15-year-old daughter, and I mean, like, there'll be times when we're like, no, you can do that. Like, go ahead and try it. Like, and so I think that's important. Um, to remind whether it be my officers or whether it be my daughter, but hey, there are some, you can do what you want to do, and you just got to be mentally strong. You got to push through a little bit. And I'm guilty of that. We're talking a lot about physical fitness, and I've let my physical fitness slip in the last year. I did a marathon hike in one day, and I was training a couple times a week for that. I was riding the stationary bike, and I did all that, and I was going to do a tough mudder, and all kinds of stuff, and it's slowly slipped away, and now I'm like, can I just do 15 minutes of something in my office?
Mhm.
Can I just get started back?
Yep.
And so that's something that I've been trying to focus on here since the new year, and say, can I just give myself 15 minutes to
Yeah.
focus on some non-impact working something here I can do in my office. So,
I like
you know, but I think we talked about it in our prep for this is that, and I think a lot of departments do this when they can. My officers have 3 hours a week. We're fortunate enough to have a fitness center here, and we also have the sports complex where they have the weight room and things. So I give my officers 3 hours a week, so 1 hour a shift basically. They can work out. There's no there's no prize for doing that. There's no punishment for they not doing it, but it's available to them when work levels allow it. And it just gives them an opportunity to, take an hour and, because a lot of my officers live pretty far from work, and so we have 10-hour days. Most of my officers work 10-hour days, but you put an hour for driving home from home and then back home, and that's 12-hour days. Plus, they had to get up. They want to spend a little time with their family at night, so we're looking at a 14, 15-hour day like that. And
Yeah.
so to give them an hour if they want to go jog around or just walk around the track or do some lifting, then I think that's important because again, um, doing this for 20 years, and I know there's officers out there that have been doing it for 40 years. It takes a toll on your body, and especially as you get a little bit older, you have to focus on that. You have
Yeah.
to take care of yourself.
I think it's all about longevity. And I had someone tell me recently, because when you're talking about how you're training really hard for these things, and um, there's a such thing as burnout. There's things that like are not sustainable long term. I'm not saying don't train for things. I'm not saying don't have goals, to run a marathon. Like that's great if that's something that is an ambition of yours or a goal of yours. But um, I was having a conversation with an academy. And they said that what they are starting to see is that in their physical fitness part of it, that they are working the recruits so hard for so long that when they finally graduate, they're all burnt out and they're like, I never want to work out again. They're
Right.
in this mindset of they're like, that was so much. Like, I don't want to do another push-up. I don't want to run. Like, I don't want to do any of it ever again.
Right.
And the question was like, how do we prevent that? Because we know that there's no continued requirements for most agencies, from a
Correct.
physical
Correct.
perspective. And so you don't want to burn out your recruits so much that they now, enter into the career and they're like, I never want to see the inside of a gym or see a
Yeah.
track ever again.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of conversation now about like, how do you create that longevity? How do you create something that is sustainable and effective to where they want to continue that for themselves? And we can start those building blocks and that, consistency early instead of being like, F that, like I don't want to do that ever again.
And,
Um,
and it's tough to do that, right? We can't, like you said, we can't make them work out. There's
yeah.
just no way we can do that. So just offering it to them, and hopefully maybe they have a buddy or a coworker that's on the same shift with them, and they're like, maybe they can kind of compete a little bit against it. Hey, I worked out tonight. Are you going to work out and that type of thing? But it is difficult.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way. Um, you know, it's just sometimes you just don't feel like working out, which is kind of how I've been about the past year. And but there usually for most people there's a spot there where you hit and you're like, okay, I gotta turn it around a little bit. Like I said, at least getting out and walking the campus, a couple times a week. So
Yeah. My last question is kind of, for the younger generation, the younger men and women who are, entering in the career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them? Something that maybe you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
funny, I actually got an answer for this years ago from a mentor of mine, and I had thought about it, and I've told people over the years about it, but I added to it. So I got two, and they kind of tie in together. And they kind of counter each other as well, but just hang in there with me. I would say that when you get the opportunity, um, go for a promotion. If you're qualified for it, um, then try out. If it's a sergeant's position and there's 5 or 6 sergeants and you might be the lowest one on the pole, still try out for it. You'll learn something from it. Um, However, make sure that you are ready for it, that you truly want it, that it's good for you, it's good for your family, and it's good for your career. Um, I was a sergeant at Vanderbilt University, and I had the opportunity to make lieutenant. And at the time, I talked to my wife, and we were pregnant at the time, and she's like, "You know what? Go for it." I was on days. I knew there was a chance I might go to nights, but I'd been on days for a while, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go for it. So I got it. Well, 2 months later, I was moved to nights. And a month after that, my daughter was born. So
Mm.
it made it very difficult for that situation with my wife that worked during the day. I worked at night. Luckily, we had family in the area, so when we couldn't make it work, we had coverage for our daughter. But don't be afraid. But at the same, just to go for the promotion, but at the same time, make sure it's right in all aspects of it. Now, the little counterpart to that is don't be afraid to make rank so fast. I loved my time as a police officer. And looking back, I wish I would have spent more time as a police officer and not tried to chase after that rank.
Mm.
Because as you go up in rank, the stress level goes up. And stress has been proved to cause sickness and illnesses. It affects your immune system. It causes inflammation, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune system. In fact, I mean, it's crazy what stress can do to you. And my mentor years ago said, "Listen, I know you're a go-getter, but don't be so anxious to be a chief of police, because once you're there, the stress level is different. It's the stress that I get from being a chief and other chiefs. It's not necessarily stress that I cause, but I have to rely on my officers. They could cause me to get fired at any moment, right? And it's not even truly be my fault. Ultimately, it's my fault because it's my responsibility. I'm taking on that responsibility, but I may not have done anything wrong per se. And so that's a lot of stress. Most chiefs, their tenure is 1 to 3 years.
Yep.
Uh, I plan on doing this for 15 more years at least, right? Until I start to approach retirement. Am I going to last that long here at this organization? I mean, I'm happy here. I love it here. I hope I can, but I don't know, maybe, maybe not. So it's just, stress causes sleep issues, all kinds of stuff. So just don't be so gung-ho to make chief or make rank because when you clock out as a police officer, you clock out. You go home, you can sleep, you can do whatever you want. As a chief, I truly never clock out, right? That stress is always there. The phone rings at night, and that's with other leadership positions as well. So that's what I would tell a young officer is just be sure that the promotion is right for you if you truly want it, but just enjoy your time as a police officer and, don't be so gung-ho to make that next level.
Love it. Thank you so much, Chief Cosby. I really appreciate your time and coming on here and talking to me. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Paige.
Of
I
course.
enjoyed it.